Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, SPC-209 Interpersonal Communications, whatever time you're consuming this little artifact of educational media. It is once again Victor McInnes, your SPC-209 instructor, coming to you live on tape from my COVID-19 compound here in the heart of the Grovetown, Georgia metro area, the Aiken Outpost in Columbia County. Today we're brought to you by Sweatpants. If you've been working from home for 2 months, we know you've pretty much only worn sweatpants. Hey, listen, what I'm going to be doing this semester, like I've already said, is I'm going to be going back and watching my old lectures. I had hoped to update them this summer in the classrooms. That ain't going to happen. I don't necessarily like sitting here in my home office and doing lectures, so I'm going to try to just sort of give them to you from here and update some things and make some things clearer. I will tell you, watching this Chapter 2 lecture that I'm about to post the link for you guys was really painful. Adam Driver, who played Kylo Ren in the last Star Wars movies, famously a couple of months ago walked out of an interview when they were trying to show him a clip of something he'd done. He famously refuses to go back and watch his old movies because he says, all I can see is the things that I messed up. Well, I got 50 minutes of that a little bit earlier today. In my defense, I had been a long time since I tried to tape lectures. That SPC-209 class was sort of thrown together at the last minute, so that lecture was done in a hurry. The camera angle I fixed later on in the semester. I get a better camera angle. My handwriting looks like I'm writing ransom notes from a kidnapper, and I don't know what I was thinking about with those baggy pants. But anyway, that's where we're at. So this will just take a couple of minutes. I'm going to jump back in, and there's two things I really want to add a little more information to, just so that everybody is, I wasn't happy necessarily with the presentation I gave then, so I want to go back and just sort of hit some high points to make sure there's no questions. And again, if you have any questions, you feel free to send me an email, and I will be happy to answer them. And if enough of you ask questions, I'll do another one of these videos and post it so you don't get a 4 or 5 page long email. I will hit it this way. So let's go back to early on in the lecture where we're talking about the three things, the 3 steps in perception: selection, organization, and interpretation. And again, what I want to hit there and make sure that everybody understands is the first step is selection. We're constantly bombarded with stimuli. We can't possibly take it all in and deal with all of it, okay? The television's on, the radio's on, you're driving. Hopefully you're not watching the television while you're driving. But we're constantly getting stimuli. A lot of times you'll be driving down the road, so your focus is on that stimuli right ahead of you, so you're a safe driver, okay? When your passenger says, wow, did you see that gigantic cow standing beside the road? And you go, no, I didn't. I'm driving. I'm not looking at cows, okay? That is the selection of the stimuli you're going to pay attention to. Was that cow in your peripheral field of vision? Yeah, it absolutely was. Okay, but did you decide to spend any mental effort to focus on it and sort of begin this perception process? You did not, okay? And that is perfectly human. It's perfectly okay. There's no way you can see and intake everything, okay? The second thing is organizing. Once you get that perception, you begin to regroup those experiences together. Now, I was really, in the examples in the earlier lecture, I was really keyed in on the visual. We see a young girl holding a young child holding the hand of an adult male, and there's another adult male walking on the other side of him. We immediately interpret that based on our experiences that that's a father and his friend with a child. We would not naturally default to that's the same gender couple with the child. There are, I probably went too heavy with those visual cues. In my job, I constantly have to deal with and work very hard to overcome my biases toward students who come in late with work. We have a tendency, and I know some instructors that just don't bother to challenge their own interpretations of this. When a student comes in and says, hey, listen, I didn't get my work in late, things have been really tough. Well, yeah, of course they've been really late. Nobody's ever come into me and asked, and said, hey, my work is late because I was just lazy and blew it off. Hey, you're not that important to me, professor. Okay, they always say something. So we have a tendency to group our experiences together in structures that we call schemata and schema that we talk about in just a second. Okay, and we have a tendency to put them into blocks and chunks that we already understand. Okay, and that is also, again, and I've had students, I've had experiences with people that go, men. Okay, and it doesn't make any difference, and again, flip it the other way around if you're gender conscious. Okay, all right. So the first step is selection of what we're going to perceive, putting that into some sort of organization, and then it's interpretation. Okay, so this is where we really get into schemata, which is that mental database we talked about, and schema, which is the singular of schemata. And the whole concept of schemata and schema came out of, again, remember we talked about it last time, about that post-World War II industrial modeling of social engagements. So this idea of having a database in your head that you lump things together in order to decide why we're doing things. Okay, and so it's our way of interpreting is by lining everything up against all the other things we've seen in our lives that are in those built into those schemata, and then comparing and contrasting it and seeing, is this something that I've seen before? If it isn't, what do I compare it to so I know how to react to it? Okay? and the simple thing is when you're driving in the Middle East, a lot of the road signs are in Arabic and then in English. But when you pull up to an octagonal, an 8-sided red sign with kif written in it in Arabic, kif means stop in Arabic, you don't need to know that. You have that in your schemata where you perceive it, you organize it into the traffic sign category, and then you interpret it because you know octagonal red signs on the road always mean stop all over the world. Okay? So that schemata allows you to put the data against existing data already organized in your head and to make that clear. Okay? Again, I just wanted to make sure, I'm not saying anything different than I did earlier in that first lecture. It's just that I think I summed up there in about 5 minutes what took me about 20 minutes to say the first time. Okay, another thing we want to talk about, let's talk about attribution, how we perceive others. We talked about internal and external attribution and about how we sort of naturally default to internal attribution. And the reason for that basically is, again, that we don't want to see necessarily fault in ourselves. Now, that becomes an issue of self-perception that we talk about, self-concept, self-esteem that we talk about later. I mean, I know people that whenever anybody is a jerk to them, their immediate reaction is to go, oh, what did I do wrong? Okay, so they're attributing the other person's actions to an external source, but then internalize it on themselves, okay? But I want you to understand that we as human beings don't tend to want to say that person is not reacting well to an environment in their lives. We have a tendency to say that person is pretty much a jerk, okay? That's an internal attribution. And to a certain extent, you can argue that, hey, if they were a good person, they would react to the situation better and know it's not my fault. Okay? I just wanted to touch base on that internal and external attribution because I think that's really important. And again, none of this is right or wrong. It's just things we need to be aware of. And then finally, let's talk about some things that we did that I just completely skipped in the lecture, and I don't know why. Possibly because, as I recall, there was a lot of external attributions going on with me that week a year ago, almost a year ago. So we talked about self-perception. We talked about self-concept, who I am, self-esteem, what kind of a person I am, self-efficacy, what I can and cannot do. And in that, I maybe got a little too specific and spoke too much about barbecued ribs from Central Barbecue in Memphis, Tennessee. I don't apologize for that. They're really good ribs. But let's talk about a couple of things real quick about what influences our self-perception. There's 4 main things that influence our self-perception. First of all is our social groups. We reflect ourselves. We talked about reflection in the looking glass and all of that, okay? Our social group, a lot of times, if we have decided to spend time with a group of people, that means we care about their opinions, okay? And we will take their opinions of us and internalize them, and that will contribute to our self-perception. Okay, so the first thing that influences our self-perception is our social groups. Those are people we voluntarily associate with. The second group that is of slightly less importance is our family. Now, a lot of you would argue that your family is much more important, and I'm not going to debate that with you because that works for you. But in general terms, think about it this way. Our social groups are people we choose to be with. Our family is people we have to be with. Okay, just because you've been with them since the day you were born doesn't necessarily mean their impact is greater. Okay, so but again, it's the same thing. We see, my parents were great people. I love and respected my parents to the day they both passed. But my parents had faults. Okay, and I would oftentimes see those faults reflected back on myself, and that had a big, usually I also saw a lot of their qualities that I respected that later in life I saw that they had. My father was a very quiet kind of guy. He was very not taciturn, but did not speak a lot of his emotions. He didn't withdraw from us emotionally. He just didn't speak them. He demonstrated them on a regular basis. And I see myself doing that with my two daughters. And that improves my self-esteem by comparing myself, I think, favorably to my parents. Okay? So social groups, family. Third is culture. I'm not going to delve a lot into culture at this point because we're going to spend a lot. Chapter 8 is all about culture. We're going to spend a ton of time on culture when we get there. The fourth thing that influences our self-perception is media. Okay, and that is incredibly important in the early parts of the 21st century. We get so many of our cues on how we should think and act and do from the media. Constantly we're bombarded with, this is what you should do, this is what you should buy, these are important people, these are influencers, you should follow their leads. Okay, so our influences on self-perception are social groups, family, culture, and media. Now, the textbook says, in general, we strive to present a public image that matches our self-concept. I doubt that. I sincerely doubt that. I think that's maybe our goal, is that at some point in our lives we will be comfortable enough with ourselves that we will allow our public image to match our self-concept. But I think as human beings, we spend a lot of time for the public. Now, there are concentric circles, those that are very close to us, those that are kind of close to us, those that are not, and then there's the vast majority of you, that really we try to tailor our public image in order to meet what others' expectations are, what our expectations are for ourselves, okay? So, and that's okay. That's human, okay? If I tell you something, I don't think I tell you anything wrong in here, except for some things you may have been taught in the past that turn out now to be incorrect, okay? So, again, do we really strive to present a public image that matches our self-concept? No. I think we present in my opinion, I think the answer to that is no. We strive to present a public image that will enhance our self-concept or reflect the self-concept that we wished we were. Okay. Oh, God, I almost got through this without coughing once. Okay. All right. So that's the supplement to lecture 2 on chapter 2. All right, so this gives you a total of about 65 minutes worth of stuff to sort of mull over with all of this. This will post. Don't forget your discussion board for this chapter. I will go over everything for that. When I post the discussion board. All right, everybody, stay safe, stay well, and we will see you soon.